you're not here. A little wren convinced me I should write this song so you'd never forget how I love you. So you never forget how I love you. So you never forget how I love you. Now it seems we are truly all watched over by machines of loving grace. Then please explain why we feel so battered by the hurricanes on this sea of stress. I close the door behind me. I'm analog, I know. Can the world still notify me? No. I'm here with you in candle glow. The grind's obscene. Can't we turn the brightness down upon the screen? And the sound too. The famous fool who said love is uncool, we can disprove, I know. In candle glow, we close the door behind us.
Start with Shelley. Yeah, I don't like that shirt either. These blue chairs are much more but too comfortable is not what we need.
Good evening. Let's get started. My name is Shelley Woodruff, and I have the honor of getting to be one of the pastors here at First Baptist Church of Decatur. And on behalf of our church, I just wanted to welcome you to this space for this purpose this evening. It's always such fun to get to host these events with Georgia Center for the Book and with the Decatur Book Festival. And I'm just excited to be back here yet again for another one of Joshilyn Jackson's summer reading series. You know, one of the things that if you've been here before, you might have heard me say is that it should come as no surprise that a church would value the written word. This week, one of the reasons that I am realizing how I value the written word is because the written word takes a voice and it amplifies it and it elevates it and it preserves it and it puts that voice in a place so that it can challenge and shape the worldview of every single human who chooses to interact with that voice through a book. And this week, I am oh so grateful to hear the voices of two strong, talented women authors. So thank you for being here in this space. Thank you for choosing to engage with these voices. And I hope to chat with you maybe after this is over, but I also hope to see you back here in this space for the other Decatur Book Festival events that we have leading up to the big festival in October. Without further ado, I think we have Joe, who's going to speak a little bit about the Georgia Center for the Book, and then we'll get our authors out.
Thank you so much, Shelley, and thank you all who are attending tonight and watching online, and thank you all who have come out for each event Thursdays in June this year for the Joshilyn Jackson Summer Reading Series. I've mentioned it before, but if you are joining us for the first time or didn't know, this reading series was started several years ago. It was supposed to appear at the Decatur Book Festival at the Decatur Library for the entire weekend. And of course, due to the pandemic, we didn't have the book festival that year. So we pivoted and started doing these events virtually. So this is the third iteration of this series. We hope to continue it both in person and virtually for years to come, because it is truly a great series with a great premise. It was originally designed to have an established author and a debut author on stage talking to Joshilyn Jackson, and it's really become something wonderful. Thanks to Joshilyn's stewardship with the addition of Nicki Salcedo and just really working to bring us great books with great messages. And for the past 4 weeks, I've been the warm-up act for amazing women authors. So it's not a bad gig for me whatsoever. I would like to thank some folks on behalf of the Decatur Book Festival. The sponsors, Emory University, the City of Decatur, the Downtown Decatur Development Authority, DeKalb County Public Library, and the DeKalb Library Foundation, and of course, First Baptist Church. They've been a wonderful friend to the Center for the Book for 14 years now that we've been doing programs over here. And between everyone who works audio, Mickey and Deborah with the volunteers, Shelley and Reverend David Jordan, have just created a welcoming environment for us and really have given us the opportunity to do so much more with books and readers. So thank you very much. Also, mark your calendars for October 1st. We will have a book festival here this year. We are slightly expanding it, but we are being prudent and just keeping it a little small for this year. But we will feature fiction and nonfiction. We will have a children's area. So do plan to come out on Saturday, October 1st. So I mentioned Joshilyn Jackson and Nicki Salcedo. We also had two fantastic guest hosts this year in Ginger Eager, who is a local author, as well as Carmen Tanner Slaughter, just doing a fantastic job and stepping in when we needed some extra hands for these events. So Nicki Salcedo is the author of the Maggie Award-winning novel, All the Beautiful Things. She, of course, is a Decatur native who, I'm sure Emery's not going to like it, but got a degree from Stanford University, and writes for the Atlanta Loop as well as the local news source Decatur-ish. Her fantastic columns and reviews have also been published in a book, and it is truly amazing to read her work, so I suggest you check that out. You can also see her sometimes writing for Write Club or The Moth, and she just does a fantastic job, and we are so pleased to have her here. She, of course, will be interviewing Sonali Dev, who is the USA Today best-selling author and who won the American Library Association Award for Best Romance and was also a Rita finalist. Her books include, of course, Incense and Sensibility and A Recipe for Persuasion. They are novels with a Bollywood twist and a take on Austen. What two better combinations are there? She is here tonight to talk about the Emma Project, so we hope you enjoy this presentation. Please welcome Nicki Salcedo and Sonali Dev.
Good evening, everyone. Our slight delay was we were taking selfies for Instagram, so thanks for being here with us, and welcome, Sonali. It's a pleasure to speak with you on stage. You're a dear friend and a wonderful writer. We're going to have a funny, happy conversation today, and we do have mics set up in the audience for the latter half of our presentation. If you think of questions, we welcome you to step up to the mic and join our conversation. So my first question is, how did you find Jane Austen? Tell us that story.
Hi, Nicki. Thank you so much for having me first, and thanks everyone for being here. It is lovely to be here in Hotlanta. And it's been kind of warm in Chicago recently, so I'm not that lost. But yeah, Jane Austen. All right, is this echoing? Is this okay?
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Okay. So, strangely enough, and this is going to be a slightly long answer, strangely enough, I found her through a retelling. So I was in 6th grade or 7th grade, so this was mid-80s, and I was growing up in Mumbai, and this was the time when we did not have 7,000 streaming channels, and television was a couple hours every evening. And there was this TV show, which was a Hindi language translation of Pride and Prejudice. So it was, much ado was made of it, naturally, because there was very little television, and there were some very talented writers involved in all of that. So it was all the buzz. And I remember watching it, and there was, Darcy was being played by this model who was also a prince, a real-life prince. So we had Darcy Mania in India before Colin Firth rose from the lake in his white shirt. But there was much ado about that. But I remember Lizzie Bennet's character was named Rekha. And what I remember is, for the first time in my life, seeing a woman protagonist who was opinionated, who did not pander to the aunties and the society, who did not change her behavior to be liked by men, who spoke her mind and was actually admired for those things. And I remember going, what is this? You know, why have I never seen this? And I think something deep inside me that believed a certain thing about the world, that believed who I wanted to be, it was like finding myself. And there was, everywhere else in all the other literature I was reading and all the movies I was watching, there really were not, A, there were no female protagonists, and B, there were no female protagonists who asked for things and got them and didn't end up either dead or in a, in a padded room. So it literally was like this, what is this thing? And I remember going off to my school library and checking Pride and Prejudice out, and then Persuasion, and then Sense and Sensibility and Emma, and I remember being completely lost. And time after time, with all of these, I was able to see exactly that there were women, who wanted things, even when society was telling them that they couldn't have things. Most of these, at least in Pride and Prejudice for sure, Lizzie Bennet's choices between, finding a husband and destitution for herself and her whole family. And one of the richest men in England proposes to her, and because he has behaved in a manner that has convinced her that he is a jerk, she says no. And she says, I choose destitution over someone who is not worthy of me. And so right there was a thing I had not seen, and I was completely gripped.
I think we forget how revolutionary the story is, but yet we come back to Jane Austen consistently, which means that idea of her being able to say no was something wonderful for all of us. And you have stories inspired by, not retellings, but inspired by Jane Austen. So tell us a little bit about the first 3 books that you've written related to Jane Austen.
Yeah, so again, because this started with a retelling, I knew, so very young when I was reading these books, and anyone who writes, we did a lot of daydreaming when we were young, and we were continuously writing these stories in our head. So I was retelling Austen, in my world, in my family, in my culture, from a very early age. So it was something, that I was naturally doing. The hot guy who lived in my building was the Darcy in it. And, so in my world, I was already fitting these stories in. And so when I started to actually think about, so this was kind of a coded thing in me already. I knew I was going to do something with it. And then, of course, I dreamed. So I had this dream where I was going to retell Austen. And I didn't really know what that meant. And then over time, I saw every form of that translation happen. Starting from Pride and Prejudice on screen to all these screen adaptations to, zombies being inserted in it, like all of it. And as I grew as an author, and when that dream was becoming a reality, where I was writing my own stories, that it started to change a little bit. I knew I didn't want to translate it. I knew I didn't want to take it and simply change the culture within which it sits. And that was not what I wanted to do. That had been done a lot, and it had been done well, and it had been done badly, but it had been done a lot, and I could bring nothing to it as an author. Instead, what I wanted to do and what I set out to do with this series was Jane Austen's books, these 4, had a very, had like a life-altering impact on me as a young person reading. These were the books that kind of, made me the person I am. So I blame them for the misery of those in my life. But it actually changed the trajectory of my life in terms of who I became, who I thought it was okay to be. And these were lessons I learned from these 4 books. So they're very seminal and formative for me. And so I knew that what I was going to do is pick out the lessons I learned from each one of them that made me who I am, that influenced my personality and who I chose to become, and then speak to those in terms of story. So it's not only is it not a retelling, it's not even a straight homage to the stories, it is an homage to the lessons I learned from each one of those stories. So in Pride and Prejudice, it was, she was essentially speaking, and in general, she had this way of understanding exactly what is absurd about the world we live in, right? And she makes no bones about that, but she also lives within those confines, which I think has, matches up really well to my life. I could see how ridiculous a lot of the ways in which we were all behaving are, and yet I only pushed within it to the extent that I could. And so that was something, that navigation, that you don't have to be blind to it. You can be aware of it, and you can still exist within it and push at its seams. So that was a thing I learned, which I wanted to talk about in all of the books. But specifically, I think, if you took each one, Pride and Prejudice is about how we meet someone, and really who we see is a holographic projection of our own minds, right? So when you meet me and you say hi to me, because of the way I look, the way I dress, that is why we pay so much attention to those things, because immediately before I open my mouth, or before you've known me, there is this whole base of decision on which this interaction is already starting out. And really, Pride and Prejudice is a story of navigating that, of realizing, where you went wrong, of admitting that, and then understanding why you made that determination, and then fixing yourself so that you can fix, whatever you thought about this other person. So it really is more an inward journey rather than, so I always think of romances as, as not boy meets girl, but as the journey of a person to come into themselves. Because I don't believe that you can let love into your life unless you learn to love yourself, right? So it is that we see this I have seen this in my own life. And, we constantly meet the exact right people, but until we're in a place where we are right, that doesn't mean anything. And so a love story is always, to me, that journey of getting to a place where you believe you're deserving of love, because until then, there is no letting love in. And so it is the original romance novel in that each one of them individually makes that journey. And then there is that right fit that happens. And so really it was about prejudices. It was about what we bring to every interaction. And that was kind of what I wanted to talk to. But even more, I think the thing to me that was interesting was that in any room, if you ask a bunch of people who is the definitive romantic hero, at least half the room is going to say Mr. Darcy. And here is right, and here is a character who really at the start of the book is a jerk, right? He has no empathy. He never, puts himself in anyone's shoes. He never tries to make all the things that we expect of good people who behave well. He does not show us that, and yet, we have our bibs ready because we're going to drool so much, right? Because we give men that chance, right? In stories, and when you're a woman and you write, the first thing that is demanded of your characters is likability. And so here we were, where as soon as an editor or an agent looks at your book, your female characters are judged, absolutely against this whole list of what makes women likable, what makes, them unlikable. And yet with a man, we're all like rubbing our hands together. Oh, he's a real jerk, which means we're going to really enjoy his journey toward, de-jerking. So I'm sorry, but you know what I mean. And so I wanted to see in 2017 if I could write a woman who owns her privilege, her brilliance, her gifts with that much ease, who is completely comfortable in her own brilliance, but who is lacking in the lens of empathy, right? So I did not want a woman who had all those things who was going to fall to her knees, because that's what we saw. It's if you saw unlikable characters, you called it arrogance and you called it, labels, and then you had to break that woman down, and that was her journey. But I wanted her to continue to own her privilege and own all the gifts she has, but to learn that her lens of empathy is what is missing. And that's the journey she makes without ever apologizing for all the stuff that is good in her life, and continuing to own it. And it was such a personal journey. Like, for me to come home every day and be in my marriage and be a woman, it completely changed the way I saw myself. So it was and we'll talk about that, I'm sure, some more. But that was, trying to see if I could flip that, and still have a woman with all of those same, all of those same attributes and gifts as this man, still be a lovable and, relatable and likable character as a woman. So that was what the gender flip was about, trying to dig into that. And do you want me to talk about recipe and sense, or we can come back to that?
I do want you to talk about it, but I want to make a comment about something you said there, because we are uncomfortable with female characters who make readers uncomfortable. And yet, we're drawn to male characters who are allowed to do this. And then you did this fabulous exploration of, what if I am just truly showing up as who I am with privilege and lacking empathy? So that's a great way to think about retelling these stories, which isn't telling the story again, but telling the heart, the theme of the stories over again. So definitely tell us about the next book.
Yeah, and I think it's personal, right? So it is each one of us, and which is why I think essentially there are, one story, 5 stories, whatever it is that Shakespeare said, that it stakes. So to me, it's each one of these, like if I ask you what does Pride and Prejudice mean to you, you're going to have a slightly different take on it. And so I think the fact that these novels are personally what I want to say in the world, right? But the framework for that is these stories that influenced me as a child. So Recipe for Persuasion is a 2-generational retelling of persuasion in a way. And there was a couple things I was trying to do with that. Again, growing up, I grew up in India, but I think all of us can relate that the world back then was a little bit more absolute than the world today. So coloring outside the lines or trying to step outside of definitions was not what it is today. And mistakes were absolute. So the way I was raised was this place of fear, right, where it was once and done. So if you don't study at the right time and don't get into the right college, your chance is over, right? If you get mixed up with the wrong crowd, your reputation's going to be ruined, your life is ruined. If at the right time, and each one of these things is, I have heard these things said to myself and to everyone else over and over again. If at the right age, you don't make the right marriage, then, that chance will be gone. All the good men will be taken or whatever, right? It was like, you make a mistake and there is no coming back from it. And that's how they scared us into towing lines. And I had, of course, I think we all have that sense that this can't possibly be true. And yet we're so afraid. We're like, oh my gosh, I failed chemistry and my life is over. And that. But reading Persuasion to me was someone saying to me, when you're young and stupid, and even if you're young and stupid enough to to be gullible or vulnerable to the ideas of those around you, and you make a mistake, and you're led astray, or you don't have the strength to stand up for something you want, and you make a mistake, there will be another chance. And so essentially to me, Persuasion was the story of this woman who grows a spine and then gets a second chance. Because she loses something precious, because she is, and every one of us is led astray by those we love, whether we like it or not, because the ideas of our parents are ideas from a different time. And they don't mean to lead you astray, but you have to go forth, break that connection, build your own ideas on top of that, right? And we all lose something because we believe what we're told is true. And that's okay, because at that age you can lose it, but something more precious awaits you. But when you lose it, and Anne Elliott's story is that she actually grows a spine. And once she grows a spine, she gets a second chance. And so it is about second chances. And that was one piece of this story for me with Ashna and Rico. The other piece of it was this lie, this other lie that I grew up with, which was, and this was a lot of Bollywood films, a lot of this thing, the arranged marriage trope was a big thing for me growing up in India. But I think this was generally stories across the world which went like this, that you have chosen a person that you're in love with, and your family deems that destructive to who you're supposed to be, and so you're forced into a different marriage. And then you find out, oh, he's actually a really good choice. And you put your head down and you listen and you make that work, and you end up with a happy life. And there was so much of that happening in Hindi movies and in stories around me. And I felt, you have that sense that you're being taken for a ride, that you're being, you're being made a fool of. And I was like, that's a really nonsense thing to teach young girls. Because what you're telling me is my family knows what's good for me better than I do. And what you're telling me is when I put my head down and I, and I make the best of my situation, I see happiness. Now, is that true? Sure. There are times when we have to adjust to what's, and make lemon out of lemonade. But to tell women that story over and over again is nonsense, right? It's breaking down their agency. And I had, and there's so much going on there, right? Also, if you choose not to listen and if you fight society, there will be collateral damage. And all of that is true because that's how society is set up. And so I wanted to write a woman who says, no, I will not comply. You can push me into this situation and you can put my back against the wall, and no, I will not comply. And so that is the mother-daughter. That's what the mother does. She gets shoved into the situation. She's married off to a prince when she's in love with someone else. And she says, no, this is not the life I want for myself. And everybody tells her, you will destroy your family and you will destroy your child. And she says, I can't. And she does destroy the child. And our heroine is the collateral damage she's warned about. But it is about second chances. And then when they have the chance, these two women make that journey. They grow that spine. They find out that, if we do the work, sure, there's all this pain which is caused because of the way the world is set up, but we can make this okay, and that's what persuasion is.
That's excellent. You used the word agency, which is a difficult word for some of us right now, feeling like we may or may not have as much agency as we would like. But we're going to move to the Emma Project. Tell us about your Emma.
So, my Emma, okay, again, because I know I'm like really answering these questions, but so to me, again, what Emma is about, often all of the Emma retellings center around matchmaking. So most, and it is not wrong if you ask most people, what is Emma about? It's about this person who is a matchmaker. To me, what Emma is about is about a person with tremendous amounts of privilege, thinking she knows what's best for those who don't have as much privilege. Because Emma literally is a bored, overprivileged woman who has everything. And she comes across this other young woman who doesn't have any of those gifts, is already in love with someone who is really good for her, in her opinion, and Emma says, no, that's not the best thing for you. Allow me to tell you what your life should be like. And so that really, it's the story of someone with privilege believing they know best, and they know better because they have more. And I think we live in a world where charity is a very interesting thing today, right? You have billionaires who are giving away most of their billions, and all of that, none of that is unconditional. So the world is literally being changed through the act of charity, which means it is being changed by the whims of certain people. Not a bad thing. It's fabulous to give away a lot of your money to do good, but then it's a very individualized definition of what that good is, right? We live in a world where one GoFundMe campaign can solve many, many problems, and all of that is good, but that's also a quick way for a lot of us to fix guilt. So that's kind of what I wanted to explore with this story. What does charity mean in today's world? And so my Emma is Vansh, who is the youngest of, so this series of 4 books is essentially set in a politically ambitious Indian American family. The Indian Kennedys is the easiest way I can explain them. And the oldest son is running for California governor. And in Sense and Sensibility is his story, and we can come back and talk about that. But so this is a very high achieving family that obviously, has very high standards for these children and all of that. And they're descended from royalty in India, which kind of adds another, layer of generational privilege to their already, privileged lives. But this is the youngest son of this family, and he has spent since the age of 16, he's basically been running around the world trying to fix it. So he goes from mission to mission to mission around the world, doing charitable work. And of course, there's a reason for what drives him. So he has dropped out of the race that everybody else in his family and in his community seems to be in. So that's his way of, living his best life. But this is what he's been doing. And Nana is, has been working in Nepal on this microfinance foundation. And so they're both rich kids trying to fix the world, essentially. But of course, that they have fully dedicated their lives to that. And Vansh has come back to America after his brother has, well, spoiler alert, won the gubernatorial race for California. I should have just said the election is over. But okay, forget what I said. He has come back after the election is over and, said, oh, there are problems here for me to fix. And again, a billionaire who is very interested in the cash of the Rajay name, asks Nana to share her funding with him. And so there are the two of them go head to head for their causes. And she was engaged for 10 years to his older brother. It was a fake engagement. There's all of this family drama, but that's my Emma project.
So we love a story that is related to other stories. So you've created a world for us with this family. And we're talking today about book 4, but despite the fact we're talking about big themes, these are also fun stories. These are happy people and actually healthy, loving family relationships. Why did you want to tell stories like that?
I think you know the answer to that. So there has, this might come as a surprise, there hasn't been a whole lot of literature, especially genre and commercial literature in the Western world that has Indian characters, or generally characters of color. And when they do, there's a lot of this thing I call poverty porn. So brown pain is in the small representation, most of that is taken up by brown pain. It feels very relatable. It is what is expected, I think, for readers from outside the culture. And there is a place for that. Sure. Is immigrant angst a real thing? Sure. Do, South Asian and Indian people stand in front of the mirror every day and bemoan the fact that they're brown? I don't know too many who do. I do not. And so that is not my story to tell. My story to tell is a story of families who don't understand what boundaries means. If I say to my mom, a little space, Mom, she'd be like, space? I don't compute. So she literally does not compute privacy and space. So that's the kind of families, and this is, and there is a lot of celebration and singing and dancing and eating, interfering, trying to puppeteer everybody's life around you, which I think is a universal thing in most families. And there's a lot of that going on, and those were the aspects that I wanted to talk about. And there is also one of the things that I think does not get any attention is brown privilege. There is also privilege in the immigrant community that never gets explored because it's always, what we were talking about, the bag of, and it, both those things should get shelf space. A story of pain is very valid, but a story of joy and journeys toward joy within the confines of bonds which can stifle the breath out of you sometimes, but also hold you up in hard times. That kind of was what I specifically wanted to speak to.
Well, I appreciate you doing that, and I think many of us can relate to having stories that we read that bring us joy. I was recently on an airplane, and one of the movie's choices came up, and it was a beautiful, historic, British kind of saga. And then as I'm watching the end of the trailer on the airplane, it said, based on a novel by Thomas Hardy. And I was like, next, because in every Thomas Hardy novel, the heroine dies, love is destroyed. Nobody reads Tom Hardy for fun. So I just wanted to remind you all that there is beautiful literature out there with joyous stories with people who still have a lot to unpack. Like, it's not purely happy, but the joy in reading in your language is just incredible, of just bringing us into a world where we feel like we're part of your family. And we felt that way with the original Mr. Darcy, which is that we believed these were our friends and this was our town and these were and it's the exact same experience. So being transformed into your book felt very much like being transformed into, I wish I was a billionaire, but a great way to spend the summer as part of our summer reading series. Tell me, what do you have coming next?
Oh boy. So I do, this is a big year for me. Emma Project just came out in May. And I have been very, 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 very busy a couple years. So I have 2 books this year. So in November 1st and December 1st, I actually have a women's fiction novel that I am incredibly excited about. And I know you can't see from that far, but it says up here, Mindy's Book Studio, which is...
Mindy's Book Studio, if you all know who that is.
So it's the thing, thank you. So it is, and I'll tell you what the book is about, but what is so exciting for me is that Mindy, I'm gonna, her last name is, I say Mindy Kaling. And if that's not how you say it, Mindy, I'm sorry. But Mindy Kaling is, to me, one of, she has changed storytelling for diverse voices over the past decade. And she is one of the wittiest, funniest situational comic writers that, I have. The Office is her, Sex Life of College Girls, Never Have I Ever. The movie Late Night, which I absolutely, absolutely love. But she is going into publishing as a publisher, and she has Mindy's Book Studio in association with Amazon Studios and Amazon Publishing. And her first book that comes out through her imprint is The Vibrant Years. And it is, yeah. So that is, to have someone I respect that much pick it is just, I still can't like pinch me, I'm dreaming. But the book itself is something it's one of those, everything I have ever, one of the things we didn't touch on when I was talking about everything else, one of the things I'm very, very intent on exploring in my books is the experience of being a woman today, as opposed to the generational growth and trauma we've seen. So the journey of being a woman has been something that that every one of these books speaks to. The Emma Project has a mother-daughter thing going on, and here our lives, I think in time, I don't know when this has happened so much, but what we're allowed to feel, allowed to want, allowed to say, compared to our mothers and our grandmothers, that is a very, very long journey. My grandmother, one of my two grandmothers, was a doctor. She was an MD in colonial India, and yet when I think about her life, and I think about my life, and everything, the opportunities I have, and I don't mean that in terms of just job and money, but the opportunities I have in terms of, who I can be, and what I can express, and how I can live, and what I can expect from my life, that journey is just, like when you think about it, it is, paradigm shift is probably a weak word for it. It is just like being on different planets, what we can do compared to and so that journey is very, very interesting to me. And The Vibrant Years is the story of 3 generations of Indian American women on the dating scene together. So there is a hot grandma who has just moved into a retirement community in Florida, and she's the new hottie in town. And this is a woman who has suddenly found a new way of living and is exploring it. And a recently divorced mom and a 25-year-old tech genius who is coding an app and ends up throwing out an idea for a dating app to save her current app, and without ever having dated. And so now they have to do this research, and these 3 women are out there on these, hideous first dates, but also finding out what it means to be alive in this time when we can want and claim whatever it is we can want and claim, and what is that journey to actually being able to do it.
That's excellent. So we'll expect a book and a movie?
A book for sure.
Book for sure, okay.
A book for sure.
That's fabulous. So that will be in November. We're here today talking about the Emma Project, and our bookseller is Little Shop of Stories. If any of these stories intrigue you, I encourage you to improve your summer by reading one of Sonali's books. We do have time now to take questions from you all. I can ask Sonali questions all night, but we have a microphone right here in the center. So if you'd like to come up and ask a question, you are welcome to do so at this time, and we'll spend some of our remaining time with questions from you if you have them. And if you're too bashful, I'll just keep talking. I see somebody standing up. So I'll repeat that question for you. It was, what is happening in the Emma Project?
Okay, great question. So I'll go back and talk about titles later because this made me think of something. But as I was saying, I see Emma in Austin's story as somebody who, coming from a place of privilege, is trying to fix other people's lives out of a sense of ennui, or boredom. And the heroine, Nana, believes that's what Vansh, the hero, is doing, that he is, because he goes from charity to charity, because he's, and this new thing that he's gotten into his head to provide a solution for homelessness in San Francisco. And he has a very specific idea, and it is his growth into learning his own, way of fixing problems. But she accuses him, because he is going to take money away from her funding, she accuses him of having an Emma project, which is trying to fix problems out of a sense of boredom and to make himself matter.
Great question. Anybody else with a question?
And while a person is coming up, please come. There's no question as to,
We have another
But before Sally comes up, I'll say that I thought Emma Project was going to be the hardest of these. I'm really proud of the titles of these books. And Sally, I'm just going to make you stand there while I tell the story of how my son helped me come up with them. But ask the question and I'll tell the story later.
Well, I was just going to ask if you wanted to talk a little bit about incense and sensibility, since it's out there too, and
So book 3.
Book 3, which almost feels like, the fulcrum of this series, because the series is kicked off when Yash, the oldest son, decides to run for California governor. And it closes, after the election. And so that's the arc of the whole series. And the whole family is kind of focused on this goal. That's their overall goal. And one of the reasons that, this was specifically what I wanted to speak to was this is also a story of immigration, of leaving your home. And they come from a history. This particular family comes from this history of royalty in India, which has its own history of the British coming in and power being lost and converted into figureheads. And so there is this whole very interesting history to that itself. But this family has moved here, and it is my belief in terms of immigration, or when you make another place your home, one of the ultimate steps in that journey is political power. Because when you truly claim your home, you say, I want to be part of making decisions. And so it is that journey to making, an immigrant family completely owning their home. So that was kind of where I was going with this, because a lot of the book is also about that, about identity. The books are about, finding your identity there. But Yash's story is this guy who has his path laid out for him from the day he was born. This is the thing that he is born to do. This is the thing everyone has always believed he's born to do. There's a prophecy. There's all of this going on. And he has never questioned his path a day in his life. And then he's at a political rally, and there is an assassination attempt. And someone he loves is hurt. And it completely throws him off his game, as you can imagine. And, we're 3 months from the election, and he has a panic attack if he tries to get on a stage. This is a man who has never had a day of, not being glib and knowing exactly what he wants. And then, of course, the only person that, who can help him with that, because anything he does is going to be public, and his sister's closest friend is a stress management guru and a yoga instructor in Palo Alto. They've known each other for very long, so there's a trust thing, and he has, for the world to see, been engaged for 10 years to Nana, and of course the only person who can help him is this woman he has some history with, and as she's helping him, other stuff happens. But I will tell you from the Jane Austen angle, Sense and Sensibility to me translates least well across time. Or put another way, the romantic conflict of Sense and Sensibility doesn't translate to today, because it is based on a person losing their standing in society for breaking an engagement. We live in a time, if your spouse sneezes in a way that you don't like, you can walk away from them and nobody will judge you, right? I mean, there is no taboo to breaking a relationship. And so it was, so then I wanted to explore in this world where we do not have any longer modes of or rules for behavior that can ruin your standing in society, what is it that can publicly ruin you? And so this whole exploration is about a celebrity and a politician. And this was back in a time when, politicians' careers were ruined if they were caught saying things they shouldn't be saying. But also, truth in politics is one of the things, and it doesn't matter which side of the aisle you're on. Really, we live in a world, again, where because of ideology, we look the other way. So if this is a thing we want, on both sides, we have politicians telling lies, and we all look the other way. And so what does truth in politics or in public life even mean? And a lot of Incense and Sensibility is the idea of digging into that, because these are two people who want to live truthfully and who want to be truthful. And they take it very seriously, and then they're in this situation where, the only way they can be public with their affection is through a lie. And how do they navigate that?
That's amazing. So when I think back on your books, the first book is about learning empathy. The second, developing a spine or being able to be strong. The third, what is truth? And with Emma, it's really understanding your privilege when you feel like your privilege can help other people and maybe you're misguided. That's a fun journey.
That is, yeah.
That's a fun journey. I would open it up for just any last questions before we close here. I probably have one or two more, but you have this beautiful reversal of gender, and I'd just love for you to close with how easy is it, or maybe how fun for you when you think about what we can and should become as people, where even the idea of gender is changing for us. And what would you like readers to learn from your novels about your portrayal of gender?
That is a very long and complicated question, but I'll tell you a simple story of something that happened to me when I was writing Pride and Prejudice. As I said, on a personal day-to-day level, I had to question a lot of my own conditioning, because as much as this is about how other people treat you, 90% of this being in a world so different from our mothers and grandmothers, 90% of that is dealing with our own conditioning, right? I myself am so tied with being a good mother first, good wife, good daughter-in-law, good sister-in-law, good aunt, these are things that I used to feel really good about myself. So my self-worth comes from so much of that. And I have spent a lot of time trying to understand what that means and what that conditioning means. And I'll tell you a little story about how, that was kind of an aha moment for me. Is my husband and I both travel for work. He's always traveled for work. With my writing, I have started to travel more and more. And our moment of homecoming is just drastically different. So he comes home after, a work trip, and he's like, I am home. I have won the wars. Now take care of me, right? He comes home having done his business into the shelter of his home to be taken care of. I would come home and be like, oh my gosh, I've been gone. I need to make this okay for everybody. So I come home with, what did the world miss because of me? What did people not get to eat? What is not clean? So our homecoming was completely different, and it was deeply, deeply, deeply coded inside of us. And those little journeys, and even today when I go home, for me, to be able to do that, to be able to say, I'm home now, someone feed me. Or, I'm home now, I'm tired of eating restaurant food, what's for dinner? It is a hard thing for me to do. And, if there is ever a day he's going to come home and say, oh, have the roses been watered? And has the, does the dishwasher need to be? And we're making that journey, but that is a day-by-day breaking down of conditioning. And I think that, in these stories, it would be really nice if a person stopped to think and, and kind of dug into that a little more, because it's in every little thing. It's in the heels we wear. It's in, the fact that last night, because I've been on deadline, I've been hibernating, and I do not look good when I hibernate. And I had, chipped toenail polish, and at night, after everything is done, I'm scraping, and repainting because I didn't have time to go get a pedicure. And I'm like, when he travels, he takes a shower, packs his bag, goes to bed. And I'm like, oh my gosh, my nails are not done. And should I, do I need curling iron? Just so many things. But they're all things of choice now, right? Which is not to say that I can show up, I want to be able to show up with nothing on my nails, and nobody's stopping me. But these are things that truly owning those choices is a journey. So.
Well, I want to thank you for taking that code away from us that maybe we were grown up with. We grew up with this certain code inside of us of who we can and should be, and your stories are going to deconstruct our beliefs about ourselves just a little bit, make us laugh, make us fall in love. I do thank you so much to come here to join us. It's been a pleasure speaking with you all. Sonali will be signing books, so if you have questions you were too bashful to ask in the audience, you can greet her at the back of the sanctuary and ask her questions, and books are available with Little Shop of Story. I'm also going to extend another thank you to Joe Davich and the Georgia Center for the Book, the DeKalb County Public Library, the AJC Book Festival, Allie, who's here, all of my friends at First Baptist Decatur who care about books, all of you who came out to enjoy this series. It's been a blast, and our dear friend Joshilyn Jackson, who was the inspiration for this summer series. Tough times, we deserve good books, and Sonali has given us many. So thank you so much, Sonali, and thank you all for being here tonight.
Thank you, Nicki. Thanks, everybody.